things, because it's easy to pull the trigger on somebody who you've learned to dehumanize over time.
I agree with that. It goes back to the training. It goes back to the laws that are in place. I think there's so many different aspects of the justice system that definitely need to be revised or relooked at. And education is key, right? Education all around is key. So I agree with that.
I was gonna say, what's another baffling piece of all this, when you look at how much of our taxes is allocated for police and how much money goes into policing, like you would think that amount of investment, like as a taxpayer, like if I'm paying this amount of money for something, they better work. If I'm putting that amount of money to like resources, why can't we find a way to prevent these things from happening? Why can't we set up systems in place so that our officers are not going in uneducated, making uneducated decisions?
I want to be balanced. I want to say something. I want to be balanced here. I tell everybody that has a question regarding how the police operate, to be fair, you need to go out and ride with your local police department. You need to get in a squad car with an officer and go out and ride with that officer so that you can see exactly what that job entails. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and Monday morning quarterback. I've had several people go out and ride with. My father went out and rode with me about 20 years ago or so. And he said, I never knew this is what you had to do on your job. And I'll just give a real simple call, a 911 hang-up call. No, officers call back, no answer on the call back. That's what the call says. 911 call, hang up, no answer on the call back. The officer gets to the door. It's 1 o'clock in the morning and the door is cracked a little bit. The front door is cracked and you're standing at the front door. Somebody has called 911. They've hung up the phone and you're at the front door. You can't reach them on the phone and the door is cracked and you have to make entry into that house. See, it's easy to, or you stop a car on traffic at 1 o'clock in the morning and the windows are tinted and there's 3 or 4 heads you can make out in the car and the license plate has a warrant on it. And you have to go up there to that car by yourself with your flashlight. And do you think it would be reasonable for the officer to have his gun out at that time? I'm going to tell you it is. It's reasonable. It is very reasonable. If you don't think it's reasonable, ride with your local police department at night and find out for yourself. Because the officer is not a robot. He's got the same fears and anxiety that anybody else would have. You know, the citizen is afraid to go to the convenience store at 1 o'clock in the morning because of the criminal activity. The officer has to engage that criminal activity by himself at 1 o'clock in the morning. So to be fair, go out and ride with your local police department at night on a Saturday so you can see exactly what the officer has to endure during the course of his shift out there on those streets. Then I think it would be fair to offer up some reforms and some solutions as to how his job can be done safer for him, safer for the citizens and everybody else.
Follow-up question, like how do we go about like requesting like riding with an officer?
All you have to do is fill out the paperwork. It's called a ride-along form. That's all you have to do. And you have to fill out that the indemnity form that says you won't sue the city in case you get injured. Because we had somebody in the 90s got killed while he was riding with an officer that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's dangerous. He was riding citizen observation and he wanted to be a police officer. He was 19 or 20 years old. He got killed in Dallas, riding with an officer, citizen observation. The job is inherently dangerous.
I'm gonna agree to disagree with you about riding with someone in order to offer reform, because America has offered reform on education 1,000,001 times, and no one comes in and sit in classrooms to see what teachers endure. And yet we have budget cuts and teachers are expected to do their jobs. So all I'm gonna say is with where that's concerned, I think that we still could request that we have some kind of police reform, and that is done so that we don't have certain communities victimized because of police officers being afraid or anxious because they decided to do a job, but I just feel like there is a better way of doing their job without attacking groups of people.
Mm-hmm. And just to add on to that, I think you got to have trust first. Like, I don't know if me or my brother would feel comfortable to do a ride along regardless because of our like just distrust. Like Major Weddington, I might feel comfortable riding with you because I know you, but you're one out of like, you know, so I think that is a pathway, but I don't know. I think there's just so much distrust in the first place. So it's like, you got to build, there has to be that trust between the police and the communities. There has to be that empathy. I do think it starts with conversations like this. But I definitely think like there's more. But I do want to try to bring it back to Breonna Taylor and us basically talking more about Kristin Evans. And my question is how has the public outcry reflected the treatment of Black women?
So I guess I could start. I think that the visibility that Black women have gotten this time around is definitely way more than what we've seen in the past. Typically Black women always get lost in the crowd, like, you know, just with coverage of death and injustices that happen to Black people, it's overwhelmingly about Black men and Black male. We don't necessarily get to see or hear about things that happen to Black women or Black trans women. And it's not because it's not happening, it's just not being covered. So I think that like now we're getting more people who are saying, we're not gonna let Black women be silenced and we're gonna elevate Black women voices. And I think the response we've gotten from the media, to me, is just kind of, I think with Breonna Taylor, it's different than what we've seen in the past with other Black women. I think people really picked up and took on her cause. Because I think that a lot of times with Black women, it's like a cry for 3 days and then you're forgotten. So or we can even bring it back to Sandra Bland. I think that's when we really started to say her name and starting to make sure that like these cases aren't just like, oh, like it's a hot topic for a week and we're over it. Like it's really just the importance of we're gonna keep saying their names, keep their stories alive, keep trying to fight for justice for them. And it's definitely different than, you know, how Black women are just being treated in our daily lives, in our everyday regular things. And it's just sad that, you know, someone has to die to even have people kind of show respect for them and show respect for their lives and what they stood for while they were alive. So I mean, with response to the question, it's kind of hard to just say it's like one way or the other. I think that we're just in a transition period, and it's just, I guess time will tell, you know, if people are taking up the cause for how it looks publicly, or if people are actually signing up to actually do the work that it takes to, you know, have this country progress and have our laws, you know, change for the better of all the people, all of American people, including Black women.
I would say, like, for me, I think what's different this time around is the fact that in our community, Black women are stepping up to say, we're going to take this on and we're going to make sure that not only is this something that is talked about within our community, but we're going to make sure that that this is talked about outside of our community, right? We've taken on this cause to make sure that we are known and that we're not just known you know, when there's something bad that happens, you know, that we're known in the good, in the bad, and we're taking a stance and being able to say, for our community to heal and for our community to be able to be stronger, we're going to take back this power in the way that we've been talked about in the media, and we're going to use this as our platform. So I think that's what's different for this time around, at least from my perspective.
I'm curious for our panelists who are outside the Black community, how has the conversation shifted in your communities or within your friend circles when we're talking about coverage for Black women?
I think for me, what's been hopeful is like people are caring, people are taking their time to do the research and realizing that just because it's not affecting them doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. And I've seen that on such a level that it is making me very hopeful.
Yeah, I think like in my circles, especially, I feel like in the past we would hear about these things and, we would have one discussion about it and then we would mention it again because it'd be like, oh, we already talked about this. But more and more I'm seeing that in my friend groups, like we bring it up over and over again because unfortunately the case is also still ongoing and there is no justice served. But at the same time, it's like, you know, in Danielle's words, like it is hopeful. Like I feel like people are really impacted by what is surfacing in the treatment of Black women, and seeing that that's also still constantly happening.
And adding on the fact that it's still constantly happening, let's talk about what happened to Kristin Evans. So she attended, I apologize if I get it wrong, I think it's Stephen F. Austin University, 17-year-old, and essentially a group of her roommates basically pulled a prank, or honestly I see it as a hate crime, but they accused that she owned a pair of scissors or whatever, and as a result, I think it was campus and local police raided this girl's room in the middle of the night. And so I'm just like, not only is this continuing to happening, but I'm really fearful about, I really hope that what we're talking about resonates with the teens, if that makes sense, like the younger age, because I'm trying to think of what was in those girls' heads to think this would be funny, and and just the lack of humanity in it. So I just kind of want us to kind of talk a bit about how it happened. It starts so young. It starts so young. Like so yeah, I'm just posing it to the panel.
It goes back to education, right? We all grew up in different communities, right? And we go to different types of schools. So it goes down to the education and what we're learning, how we're learning it, and how we're seeing that come to fruition or come to life in our daily experiences. So yes, I do find it disheartening that these women are young and that they're doing something like this. But it goes back to, what were they taught, and were they exposed to people who are different from them, not just in the color of their skin, but also in the different ways that they think. So it goes back to education.
I 100% agree with that. And I think that language is very important. That I think a lot of times when it's like young women doing this, they'll say, oh, they were hazing, or it was a prank. They're young women, they don't know any better. And I don't think that we can use that as an excuse. I think that we do need to be very vocal about the fact that this was a hate crime. This could result in very, very horrible consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I read about it, like I was so shocked that like they used the word prank with the phrase that they said. That's just like her, she had scissors and she was using them to stab. Like I was like, how do those things go together? So I thought it was like absurd that they would even call it a prank. And like for sure, like I think we should relabel it and only refer to it as a hate crime. Like that, it doesn't make any other sense to me. But I remember that just really hitting me when I read that. I was like, how was this taken as a prank at any moment?
Yeah, but you like it happened in university. I think it just like reminded me how universities are a microcosm of larger societies. It happens in, it's like universities are like little versions of like the world, right? And it took me right back to like being at U of I and like hearing about those like cases in the dorms, like when like the 2016 election came and you hear like people like putting up Confederate flags or like swastikas like in the dorm rooms and stuff. And I think, earlier in this conversation we touched upon oh, maybe it would be good if we required police officers to get like university education, but then I feel like we also have to come into question the values that these institutions are built and the culture that is like being promoted like in the university. Like your first Drive the Conversation panel, someone that was working towards diversity and inclusion in residence halls. I feel like now more than ever, like those measures are important. If universities are a microcosm of society, we then have the opportunity to like train like these young people in these little societies to be better.
Two things that stood out to me. One was that they had a term for this called swatting, which tells me that this is like a previously established practice that people do. Like if you have a colloquial term for it, then this must have been done semi-regularly before. And that the other part was that 10 students were involved in this. This is not like one or two people with a personal spite or stupidity doing this. This is 10 people. The angle that I also think that is relevant is that this kind of behaviors not only it's not just Kristin Evans that is put at risk and also insulted in this particular way. It is also insulting to law enforcement. As Major Weddington has given us some insight, the life of law enforcement officers, patrol officers, can be stressful enough. To give them a false report, to pretend that something is serious, and to get them under stress in a situation that should have never happened, that is another layer of responsibility. And so in this case, we not just have a sort of a very negative effect on one party, which is Kristin, and that this should never have happened to her. Those officers should never have been called to that case either. They should also never have been put in a position where a second Breonna Taylor situation might even happen. So there's, again, even law enforcement, Kristin Evans, both of them are not winning here. They're both losing this, and because of what these 10 people did.
I think it's definitely an unfortunate circumstance to happen to any young person. One of the things that I actually thought about was when David was talking was the mind frame of the young people that actually pulled off the prank, and what allows you to make you think that you can do something like that to someone and be okay with it. And I always think about just the level of privilege some of these kids have, where they feel like, oh, I can do this. And not only can I do this, but if I don't get away with it, this is what I can label it. We talked about the miseducation of our kids, but think about this. Our children are taught to have more empathy for something that happened on German soil than for them to have empathy for something that has happened on American soil. So once again, when you can dehumanize people, it really doesn't matter what you do to them. So you think about that white privilege and what those kids are able to get away with and do. That's what allows them to have that, I guess, to even be consciously aware to do something that despicable to somebody is ridiculous.
And I think it's important to call out how this is even emphasized in, I don't know, social media, pop culture. So like, I'm getting into TikTok now, but there's some really problematic trends where people will be like, oh, like, even like when you even get into colorism, right? Where it's like, oh, either it's a black girl, dark skinned woman, and like a guy will run one way, or then if it's a white woman, they'll run this way. Like things like that, where it's like, this is like, kids are seeing this and they think this is further dehumanizing you the darker you are. So I think it's another thing when we look at what is being put out there, because yeah, kids go to school, then when they come home, they're on TikTok, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram. I'm specifically picking on TikTok though. I do like TikTok, I want to claim it, but I'm saying is like, it can be problematic in terms of what, there's like problematic racist jokes that are still occurring.
Yes, which is why I don't remember who said it, saying that, you know, it should be referred to as a hate crime, not a prank, because I think that a lot of times we do give more grace to young non-Black people than we do to, you know, young Black people, whereas, you know, if a Black person is having a tantrum, they're going to be seen as angry or disruptive in class. Or if a white kid is having a tantrum, it's like, oh, like they're having a bad day. Like we don't extend that same amount of grace to Black people. And I think that it's time that we start holding non-Black people accountable, because I just think that like in this day and age, especially coming right off the heels of the Breonna Taylor situation, calling the police on a Black person as a prank is so careless to the point where it has to be intentional. Like there's just no way that you think that, oh, this is for fun. And like David said, they have a name for it. So we know this is something that has been happening repeatedly. So it's just like having to hold these kids accountable. Watching the press release on the news with the girl, and you could just see how distraught she was. Like, she's a freshman, and I don't know how old all the other kids were, but like Jewel said, there's kids on TikTok, like they know, like they're educated, so we can't just be like, oh, they're young or they're freshmen, we can't hold them accountable. No, I think that holding them accountable at such a young age is going to teach them the lessons that they need to learn, so that we don't have people growing up and coming out of college and being the police officers or the doctors or the people who are serving Black people and already holding these implicit biases against Black people. So yeah, we do need to like push things and call them for what they are. So this definitely was a hate crime.
No, hey Anne, retweet.
Yes.
Retweet. I just want to share an experience that I had last year. I had the privilege of serving again like in CPS, and my sister and my family, like my sister goes to a District 204 school. So the juxtaposition of just like what happens in like the Naperville Aurora area, where you hear about kids with heroin charges, and because like the community has had their back because of the affluence, like they go through that charge with still like an unharmed future, whereas like my kids will have like a sharp, like in the north side of the city in CPS, like they'll have like a small like shoplifting charge or like a marijuana charge, and that like ruin like the way that the justice system responds to them, because they don't happen to have the affluence, they don't happen to have the right skin color. Like it ruins their chances into like getting into good schools, and it's sad. It's really sad.
On this issue of how I cannot, in terms of how media, our responsibility in the media, I cannot control. It is out of my control what some random person posts on TikTok in terms of what jokes, what, appropriate or not they place. What I do have control is what I post on social media and communicate with people. When I was in Urbana-Champaign, the people that showed my art and my work the greatest love and support was the Urbana-Champaign Black community. Not just the student community, but the local Urbana-Champaign communities. And so they commissioned a lot of work from me. And so I have a responsibility then as a non-Black person and as an artist to represent them as faithfully as I can, given the scope of my experience and with as much respect as I can. And I can do that. And the most I can say is if any forum that I occupy, if any space that I occupy, and I'm not a saint in this matter, so I will lapse. But if I'm occupying a space that, if I can control the way I view people and represent people, and in that way, it's maybe more likely that other people will follow that lead. Many times we follow bandwagons. So if the prevailing environment of TikTok favors certain kinds of potentially nasty humor, then people will follow that and think that's trending, and people will sometimes just lean into what is trending in order to get the views and the approval. But in a age of lies, telling the truth is revolutionary. So if being able to be principled in that kind of environment, if we're able to do that, then we actually do, I think to a degree, we can stand out.
And I think it also goes back to supporting the creatives that are celebrating all cultures, right? So cultures from different ethnicities, cultures from the LGBTQ community, because that's the upside of TikTok, right? Is like using specific hashtags and just looking for the positive creators and supporting them versus the people that are putting hateful content out there. So a way of really taking that power into your own hands and really just making sure that you're able to continue to have positive messages and then carry that forward as well.
I wanted to ask everybody to react to the following statement by Cornel West. Justice is what love looks like in public. Again, justice is what love looks like in public.
Statement kind of reminds me of what someone said in here earlier about kind of like the disconnect between what is legal and what is moral. And I think that it just kind of reminds me of how like we are basically fighting for a justice that is going to be the balance of both. Like where we have, you know, what is legal in our country is, you know, kind of compatible with what is morally right and what, you know, we take to heart as people. The statement itself, I think that it's like, obviously, you know, I agree with it, but yeah, I think that it's true. And like I said, it's just something that we are fighting for and something that we want to have in our communities as well.
Yeah, I struggle to answer because you said justice is what love looks like, but it's like, where is the love? Because where's the justice, you know? So I think that would be a great kind of America's love to us, is if we can finally start getting justice for our bodies, our Black bodies, our human bodies in general. So I guess like I agree, like that's what love looks like. It's like, where is it? Does that make sense?
I think I was thinking more along the lines, just like you said, Jewel. Justice looks like love, what love will look like in public. You think about what happens behind closed doors. And if it's not just, then you shouldn't be doing it. So that you shouldn't be doing it. And you should always think about your actions, and you're doing those actions in the sense of love. And I think about just the impoverished communities within the United States, and once again, how some communities just have not received that love in so many different aspects, not just justice, but economically. You think about it, environmentally, like so many. We have, once again, those disenfranchised communities that suffer. So you wonder, where is the love when it comes down to the country that we actually live in? And will we ever get the justice that we actually deserve?
And just to go off of that, I think it's about, what are the stories that are being told, like in the broad media, right? Are they covering those disenfranchised communities? Are we talking about the things that are difficult, or the truths that are difficult to hear? So I think that's what he needs when he talks about justice is love. Is what love looks like in the public. Are we shining the light on the things that are bad, the things that are good, and are we having that conversation to include everyone? Only some stories are being told, not all the stories. So how do we make sure that we are taking that mantle and being able to give an opportunity for all communities to have a voice and have a say, and then also allow a platform to, even within our own community, to talk about the things that are really difficult for us to talk about. So we have to face the hard and difficult truths in order for us to heal. So truth and love go hand in hand. So we have to be willing to be unapologetic to ourselves, to our communities, and society in order to have justice.
All right. Well, to wrap us up, you know, the name of our show is Drive the Conversation, and it's to really inspire other people to have this kind of conversation. So just how we've been able to have this conversation, how can we encourage our audience to drive it within their own communities to inspire action?
I would say the first is just getting informed and doing the work. So don't leave it up to, you know, your friends that are people of color to inform you. You know, take that initiative to go out and get information, but then come back and have the bravery to have that conversation with the people who are near and dear to you.
Okay, I was gonna say it definitely starts with your circle, so your friends, your family members, but also even doing something like this where, you know, you meet up with a group of people and just kind of have these conversations, or you know, if you meet up with a group of people, even including, like we did with Major Wellington, including police officers or law enforcement officers or lawyers or people who kind of hold these positions of power, and for one, to be able to kind of get their perspective, but two, also kind of have our voices heard and our side heard, and just try to kind of find common ground between us as civilians and them as enforcement officers. But having these broader conversations in our communities. So in our circles, in groups of, maybe our classmates, in our various schools or whatever different parts of community you're a part of, just kind of pushing that and advocating for dialogue, because it's definitely necessary. And also implicit bias training, I think, is very important. And I think that's something that needs to start from a very young age and just kind of be refreshed along the way. Like, it's not just something that you need to hear once. Like, you need to hear it when you're 5, you need to hear it when you're 12, you need to hear it when you're 20, because it does work. And I think that the more awareness we have, you have more people catching themselves in whatever biases they might have, and if you are a good person and you catch yourself, maybe thinking away, you're gonna think, well, how am I gonna change that? How do I change my mindset on this? But I know, like, we can't change everybody. You can't force everybody to want to do good or be good, but the people who care will do the work, definitely.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, those are some really, really good points. The implicit bias, revisiting that over and over again. But also, one thing that stood out to me is after being informed, to expand your circles, to reach out to people, outside of your circle, and to have those intentional conversations. Like, if you see someone posting about this on Instagram, like, reach out to them, reply to their story, have a conversation. Like, I've seen that I've started to do that, and people want to talk about it, and people want to, discuss and engage in conversation and learn from other people. So, like, you can encourage that by being that person that reaches out, and I think that would really spread conversation.
I completely agree with that. And I also think it's so important, like, in having these conversations, to also check in and make sure to spread love and, like, letting your Black brothers and sisters know that you are there for them when they need to talk, and, like, it's not their job to be the educators. You're also there for them when they need to just vent, like, anything and everything going on.
One of the things that I want to add, everybody has so many great comments not too long ago. That was awesome. One of the things that I definitely think that's so important, and I think you guys all hit on it in your own way, is really diversifying your circle. So many times we are in circles where people only look like us, and we can't find solutions that way. But if we learn to just diversify our circles and have those meaningful conversations, I think that we will start to see change, and also reaching out to our younger kids that are out there, and taking them under your wings, and helping to educate some of them, like being mentors to some of those kids that really need that guidance is definitely a way that we can drive those conversations.
To build on what Yoshika just said, in terms of diversifying our circles, for me, the critical part of that has been never to refuse the opportunity to engage when that opportunity is presented to me. If I go around just actively search sometimes, and we don't know, it doesn't guarantee that I'm willing to listen. Maybe I'm just adding a token minority to my friends list, or token historically disenfranchised individual to my friends list. And that's not what we want. And what we want is to say, well, if this individual wishes to or has something to say and is willing to speak with me on it, I want to be able to say, I will not refuse this opportunity. I welcome this opportunity to do so. And that will be a layer beyond merely just seeking out specific people, or specific people that fulfill a certain expected, look or some origin or something like that.
So for me, it's like, as a person, like a non-Black person of color, like definitely, like, examining, like, the nuances that come with, like, being, like, for me specifically, for being like a Filipino woman, and like being, like, cleaning up in my own village, like, first, like I may, like, as a single person, like, I can only do ripples in terms of, like, the greater good, but I know I can do a lot of change, just like, like, connecting, like, using my language to, like older folks who, like, still have so much, like, anti-Blackness that are, like, passed on to us by, like the Americans and the Spaniards that colonized my country. And like yeah, like, I know that, like, in the grander scheme of things, I can only do ripples, but I know that in my own village I can do so much.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. Just plus 1,000 to what all of y'all are saying is diversifying your circles, but also like talking about like talking within your families. And yes, not only relying on the people who are directly affected on this, to educate is very key as well. So I think they're really great points. And with that, we're going to wrap this conversation. I want to give a big thank you to all of you for being on this panel and being brave and sharing your voice and your perspective. And we really hope this inspires all of you to engage your engage communities and continue to drive the conversation. So with that, thank you, everyone, and we will see you all in our next episode. Bye.